far away, in a place where the nights are very, very long, the sky does something rather wonderful. It glows. Not the way a lamp glows, or the way a torch glows when you shine it at your hand, and your fingers go pink and warm. No, this is a different kind of glow entirely. It moves. It shifts. It ripples slowly across the sky like a great, quiet curtain of green and silver, and sometimes the most beautiful soft pink you have ever seen, drifting and folding above the snow and the frozen trees and the sleeping animals below. People call it the Northern Lights. And tonight, while you are tucked up warm and still, let's wander up there together. Very gently, very slowly. Very slowly. And find out what those lights really are and why the sky does such a lovely thing. Now, before we begin, I want you to do something. Just settle a little more comfortably. Let your shoulders go soft. Let your arms be heavy. There you are. That's just right. The story of the Northern Lights starts a very long way away, much further than you might think. It starts, in fact, with the sun. You know the sun, of course. That warm yellow light that comes through the curtains in the morning. The one that makes dust float and sparkle in the air. The one that warms the top of your head when you step outside. The sun feels very close when it's doing all of that. But actually, the sun is enormously far away. If you could drive a car to the sun, which you couldn't, but let's imagine it would take you about 170 years. 170 years of driving without stopping, not even for snacks. So the sun is very, very far away. And yet somehow, every single day, its warmth reaches all the way to us. And that's because the sun doesn't just sit there quietly. The sun is always, always busy. Deep inside the sun, things are happening that are almost impossible to imagine. It is so hot, so incredibly, impossibly hot, that it makes our warmest summer day feel like a cool breeze. The sun is not just burning the way a candle burns. It is doing something much more powerful than that. It is like a great, roaring heart at the center of everything, always pulsing, always sending things out into the darkness. And one of the things it sends out is a kind of breath. Scientists have a name for this breath. They call it the solar wind. Solar means to do with the sun, and wind because it blows. Constantly, endlessly, in all directions at once, the sun breathes out this invisible wind. It is made of tiny, tiny particles, so tiny that you could never see one, not even with the best magnifying glass in the world. They are smaller than anything you have ever held in your hand. And these tiny, invisible particles travel outward from the sun in all directions, like a breath spreading through a room, and some of them, a small drift of them, travel in the direction of our little planet Earth. It takes them about 2 or 3 days to make the journey. Can you imagine that? Tiny, invisible things traveling through the emptiness of space for 2 or 3 whole days, just drifting in the dark before they finally arrive here. And when they arrive, well, that is where the magic begins. Now, Earth has a secret. It's not really a secret, because scientists know all about it, but it feels like one, because most of us go about our whole lives not thinking about it at all. The Earth has a magnetic field. You might have played with magnets before. Maybe you have noticed how 2 magnets, when you push them together the wrong way, seem to push each other away, as if they are saying very firmly, "No, thank you, not today." And maybe you have noticed how iron things, pins, paper clips, little pieces of metal, will jump toward a magnet as if they are very pleased to see it. The Earth behaves a little bit like a magnet too. Deep, deep underground, at the very center of our planet, there is an enormous core of hot iron. And that iron core spins very slowly, and as it spins it, creates something rather extraordinary. A whole invisible magnetic field that surrounds the entire Earth, wrapping around it like a soft shell you can't see or feel. This magnetic field is doing something very important. It is protecting us. All the time, every day, without any fuss, it is gently pushing away most of the solar wind. All those tiny invisible particles from the sun's breath, and sending them harmlessly around us. But not all of them. Because magnetic fields have 2 special places where they are slightly different. 2 gaps in the protection, one at the very top of the world and one at the very bottom. We call these the North Pole and the South Pole. And it is through these 2 gaps that the tiny particles from the sun are able to slip through. And here is where the story gets beautiful. When those tiny particles come streaming down near the North Pole and the South Pole, they enter the Earth's atmosphere. The atmosphere is the thin layer of air that wraps around the Earth. The air that you are breathing right now, slowly, gently, in and out. It is full of tiny, invisible molecules, little pieces of the gases we call oxygen and nitrogen. And the tiny particles from the sun come tumbling down through all of that, bumping and colliding with everything they meet. And when those collisions happen, when a tiny particle from the sun bumps into a tiny molecule of air, something magical occurs. The molecule gets excited. I know that sounds funny, but that is genuinely what scientists say happens. The molecule gets excited. It gets all full of energy, like when you have been spinning around and around and you stop and your whole body feels buzzy and alive. And then, a tiny moment later, all of that energy has to go somewhere, and where it goes is out. It comes out as light, not a very big light. Just a little tiny flash. One tiny molecule, one tiny flash. But there are more molecules of air above the North Pole than you could ever possibly count. Trillions upon trillions upon trillions of them. And all of them are being bumped into at the same time, and all of them are letting out their little flash of light. And when trillions upon trillions of tiny flashes all happen together, they become something that can be seen from the ground far below. They become the northern lights. Now, the color of the light depends on what kind of molecule got bumped and how high up in the sky it was. The most common color, the one people see most often, that great drifting green, comes from oxygen, high up in the sky. Not very high up, but a certain height. And that particular type of oxygen, at that particular height, makes green. A soft, glowing, slightly golden green, like looking through a piece of sea glass, or the color of the very first leaves in spring. But if the oxygen is even higher up, much higher, up near the very top of the atmosphere, it makes a different color. It makes red, a deep, soft red, like the last light before a winter sunset. Red auroras are rarer. Not many people get to see them, but they do happen quietly up there at the very edge of our air. And the nitrogen, the other gas, that makes different colors too. Sometimes a deep blue, sometimes a purple. Sometimes, at the very edge of things, where the green and the other colors mix, a soft, shimmering pink, like the inside of a shell. Isn't that wonderful, really? To think that colors in the sky are made by something as simple as tiny, invisible particles bumping into tiny, invisible molecules of air. It sounds like it should make a sound, doesn't it? A little pop or a fizz. And actually, some people who live in the far north, people who have watched the northern lights their whole lives, say that sometimes, on very still nights, you can hear a very faint crackling or hissing coming from somewhere above. Very soft. Very easy to miss. Scientists are still a little puzzled by this, but the people who have heard it feel quite sure about what they heard. The best places to see the northern lights are the places closest to the North Pole. Countries like Norway and Finland and Iceland, which is a small island in the middle of a cold ocean, and despite its name is actually not that icy, though it is certainly chilly. And Alaska, which is the largest state in America, all the way up at the very top of the continent, where the winters are very long and very dark. In all of these places, on a clear winter night, when the solar wind has been particularly busy and the sky is free of clouds, people wrap themselves up in enormous coats and mittens and hats and boots, and they go outside and they look up. And there, across the dark sky, the lights begin. They do not come on all at once like a lamp being switched on. They drift in. They arrive softly. First, just a faint glow along the horizon, like a pale reflection of something. And then, slowly, slowly, they begin to move. They ripple. They fold. They flow like a curtain in a gentle breeze. But there is no breeze, or not that anyone can feel. The movement is something in the light itself, something in the way the particles are moving through the sky far above. And the colors shift just slightly from one moment to the next. Green deepens. A line of pink appears, and the whole thing hangs there, silent, enormous, doing its slow, quiet dance above the dark, frozen world. People who see the northern lights for the first time, people who have always wanted to see them and waited a long time and finally get their chance. Those people often do not say anything at all for quite a while. They just stand there, looking up, with the cold on their cheeks and their breath making small clouds in the air, and they are very quiet. Because some things are too big and too beautiful for words, and it is enough just to see them. People have been seeing the northern lights for as long as there have been people in those northern lands. Thousands and thousands of years. And for almost all of that time, they did not know what caused them. The science, the solar wind, the magnetic field, the excited molecules. All of that was only worked out a few hundred years ago, and the full picture took even longer than that to piece together. So what did people think before they knew? All sorts of things, wonderful things. The Old Norse people, the Vikings, who were the people of Scandinavia, the countries in the far north of Europe. They had many stories about the northern lights. Some believed they were reflections from the shields of the Valkyries, which were warrior women who rode horses across the sky. The glinting of those shields made the lights dance, they thought. And isn't that a lovely idea, even if it is not quite right? Other Old Norse stories said the lights were the Bifrost Bridge, a glowing rainbow bridge that connected the world of people to the world of the gods, lit up and shimmering in the sky. The people of Finland. And Finland is a country with a beautiful language full of long, gentle words. They called the lights Rasrach, which means foxfires. They told a story of a great magical fox running through the night sky, whose tail swept across the stars and left trails of colored light behind it. The fox's tail brushing the snowy treetops would send sparks flying upward, and those sparks became the northern lights. And when you see the lights rippling and moving, shifting and flowing, it is very easy to see why someone might think of a fox. Clever and quick and glowing. In some parts of Alaska and Canada, the Inuit people who have lived in the far north for a very, very long time had stories that the lights were the spirits of animals. Seals and beluga whales playing a game up in the sky. And some stories said that if you whistled quietly, the lights would come closer, curious, bending down toward the sound. Isn't that a beautiful thought? To whistle softly into the cold night air and have something that beautiful turn toward you. Now, here is something that might make you smile. The northern lights do not only happen in the north, at the very bottom of the world, at the South Pole, down in Antarctica, which is a continent made entirely of ice and cold. The same thing happens. The same solar wind, the same magnetic gap, the same bumping particles and excited molecules and glowing sky. Down there, they are called the Southern Lights, or the Aurora Australis. Aurora was the Roman goddess of the dawn. Her name was used because the lights have that same quality of the early morning sky, that soft radiance before the sun comes. And Australis is a Latin word meaning southern. So Aurora Australis means the southern dawn. Very few people see the Aurora Australis because Antarctica is extremely hard to get to, and the only people who live there are scientists in research stations, spending a winter in one of the loneliest, coldest places on Earth. But they do see the lights, those scientists, and they say they are just as beautiful as the lights in the north. And here is the most remarkable thing of all. When you look at photographs of the northern lights and the southern lights taken at exactly the same moment, when you compare them, one from the top of the world and one from the bottom, they are mirror images of each other. The same shapes, the same colors, the same movements, happening simultaneously on opposite sides of the planet. Because they are. They are both happening at once, perfectly paired, perfectly matched, like two hands moving in a mirror. You can imagine what it is like to be in the far north when the lights are there. The land is covered in snow. Not the slushy wet snow that sometimes comes in winter, but clean, dry, deep snow that squeaks softly when you walk on it. The trees, tall pine trees, covered in white, stand very still in the cold. There is almost no noise. Just the faint crunch of a boot in the snow, and maybe the far-off sound of wind in the trees. And above all of that, the lights. If you lie down on your back in the snow, which is perhaps the best way to watch them, even if it is very cold, and you look straight up, you can see them spread across the whole sky from one side to the other. And the stars are still there, behind the lights, steady and quiet. The stars don't mind the aurora. They have seen it many, many times for billions of years. The lights move slowly, not fast at all. Nothing about them is hurried or urgent. They fold and drift the way smoke drifts on a still day, or the way a silk scarf moves when you hold it up and let it fall. Peaceful, unhurried, just gently doing what they do. Some nights the display is very simple, just a faint green glow along the horizon, like a distant city seen from far away. And some nights it fills the whole sky, enormous and detailed, with great arching ribbons of green and gold, and the occasional flash of pink, moving and folding for hours. The lights do not know they are being watched. They are not performing. They are just the result of the sun breathing out its invisible breath day after day, and that breath finding its way through the tiny gap at the top of the world, and all those molecules of air being bumped and excited and letting their light out. It has been happening for billions of years. Long before there were any people to look up and wonder at it. Long before there were any eyes at all on this little planet. The sun, you see, has been doing this for an extremely long time. Our sun is about 4.5 billion years old. That is a number so large that it doesn't really mean anything to our minds. If you tried to count to 1 billion, just 1 billion, counting one number per second, every second of every day without sleeping, it would take you about 32 years. To count to 4.5 billion would take you about 143 years. And for all of that time, the sun has been breathing, steadily, endlessly, sending its solar wind out in all directions. And for much of that time, for as long as Earth has had an atmosphere and a magnetic field, those little particles have been finding their way down near the poles, and the sky has been glowing. So when you think about the northern lights, you can think about them as something very ancient, as old as the mountains. Older than the mountains, actually. Older than the dinosaurs. Older than almost anything you can think of on this earth. And still happening. Still happening tonight, right now, while you are lying there warm and still. Up near the North Pole, if there are no clouds, the sky might be glowing green. Some scientist in a warm building is probably looking at it on a screen or through a window. Some traveler who came all this way just to see this is standing in the snow with their mouth open, not quite believing how beautiful it is. And here you are, warm and safe, knowing all about it. You know, the lights have their own name too, a proper scientific name, the one scientists use when they are writing papers and studying data and explaining things to each other. They are called the aurora borealis. Aurora borealis. Say it very slowly in your mind. Ro, raw. Bore. Lis. It is a beautiful sound, isn't it? It sounds almost like music. It sounds like something that should be spoken softly in a quiet room. Aurora was the name of the Roman goddess of the dawn, the person who, in the old stories, brought the light of morning across the sky. And Borealis comes from Boreas, who was the Greek god of the north wind, the cold breath that comes down from the north on winter days. So, Aurora Borealis means something like the northern dawn or the dawn of the north wind. And the person who gave the lights that name, the person usually given credit for it, was Galileo Galilei, an Italian scientist who lived about 400 years ago. Galileo looked up at the sky an enormous amount. He built one of the first telescopes. He worked out that the Earth goes around the sun, not the other way around, which was considered a very bold and surprising claim at the time. And one day he saw, or heard about, those strange lights in the northern sky, and he gave them a name, Aurora Borealis, and that name has been used ever since. There is something else rather lovely about the northern lights, and it is this: they are not always green. We talked about the colors earlier, but let's linger here for a moment, because the colors are one of the most wonderful things about them. The green is the most common, yes. That soft, glowing green that looks like it shouldn't quite be a real color but somehow is. On most nights when the aurora is visible, green is what you see. It fills the sky in great soft waves. But sometimes, on particularly active nights, when the solar wind is blowing especially strongly, when the sun has done something called a coronal mass ejection, which is like a particularly large breath, a great puff of particles sent out in one direction. On those nights, the lights can be extraordinary. Red appears, high up in the sky. Not a dramatic red, not the red of something urgent, but a soft, deep red, like old velvet or a winter rose. It is rare and beautiful, and when people see it, they tend to stand very still. Purple and blue appear at the edges of things, in the lower parts of the display. Deep colors, like the color of the sky just after sunset, before it goes fully dark. And pink. Pink at the edges where the green and the red mix together. where the oxygen and the nitrogen are doing their tiny work at the same time and the colors blend. Soft pink, like the inside of an ear or a peach in summer. On the very best nights, all of these colors are present at once, layered and shifting, and the sky looks like something a painter made, except no painter could quite manage it because the lights move, and no painting moves like that. The lights are seen in a ring around the poles. Not right at the very tip of the North Pole, right at the exact spot that Father Christmas's house is supposed to be. But in a ring a bit further out, a sort of oval shape encircling both poles. Scientists call this ring the auroral oval. And within that ring, in the places that sit right underneath it, the lights are seen most often. Parts of Norway, parts of Sweden, Finland, Iceland, the northern coast of Canada, Alaska, Greenland, which is a large, cold island covered in ice and inhabited by people who are very used to dark winters and glowing skies. Sometimes, though, when there has been a very large burst from the sun, one of those coronal mass ejections, remember? The auroral oval expands. It grows bigger. It spreads further south than usual. And when that happens, people in places that do not usually see the lights at all can look up and be surprised. People in Scotland have seen the northern lights. People in the north of England have seen them, faintly, on very good nights. People in parts of the United States, much further south than Alaska. Even, very, very rarely, people in places as far south as Italy have reported seeing them. Just a faint glow on the northern horizon, a rumor of color in the sky. And when those unexpected auroras appear, there is always a little stir. People wake up their neighbors. People step outside in their pajamas. People in cities who don't usually see anything in the sky but the moon and the orange glow of streetlights. They sometimes see, on those rare exceptional nights, just a faint ripple of green or pink above the rooftops, visible even through the light pollution, doing its quiet ancient thing. The northern lights also happen on other planets. This is one of those facts that, if you sit with it for a moment, is really rather large. Jupiter. The biggest planet in our solar system, the enormous gas giant with the great red spot, a storm that has been spinning for hundreds of years. Jupiter has auroras. Enormous ones. Much bigger than ours, because Jupiter is much bigger than us. Jupiter's auroras are so large that if you could put the entire Earth inside Jupiter's aurora, Earth would fit comfortably with room to spare. Saturn has them too. Saturn, with its beautiful rings, has its own gentle glowing oval around its poles, where its own solar wind particles make their own small lights. Uranus has them. Neptune has them. And even some of the moons of other planets, some of the moons of Jupiter, have their own little auroras, because those moons have their own small magnetic fields, and the particles find their way through. So wherever there is a planet with a magnetic field and an atmosphere, there is the possibility of auroras. Curtains of light in the dark, excited molecules releasing their tiny flashes, the universe quietly doing its wonderful thing. Imagine for a moment if you could float somewhere out in space and look at the whole solar system spread around you. You would see the sun at the center, warm and golden and enormous, and all the planets slowly circling it. And coming off the sun in all directions, that constant invisible breath. And at every planet with a magnetic field, at every pole of every such planet, a faint glowing ring of light. Dozens of auroras, all happening at the same time, all across the solar system. The universe is not empty at all, really. It is full of things, full of light. It is getting late now. The story is beginning to slow down, the way good stories do. Let's come back to that person in the snow. Let's think about them one more time. They are somewhere in Norway, maybe, or Finland, somewhere in the long Arctic winter, where it is dark for most of the day. The snow is deep and clean and quiet. The pine trees are standing very still. The temperature is far below freezing, and their breath makes small clouds in the air, and their eyelashes have tiny crystals on them from the cold. And above them, the northern lights. Soft green tonight, mostly, with just a hint of pink along one edge, moving very slowly. A great arc of light crossing the whole sky from one side to the other, rippling gently, doing its slow and ancient dance. They are very quiet, this person. They have been standing here for a while now. Their feet are cold, but they don't want to go in yet. Because the light is so beautiful and so peaceful, and in a world that is sometimes quite busy and noisy and full of things, standing underneath something so enormous and so silent and so completely unconcerned with the busyness of things. It is a relief somehow. A gentle reminder that the world is much larger and much older and much more wonderful than we usually have time to remember. Far above, the tiny particles from the sun are still arriving, still bumping into molecules of oxygen and nitrogen, still making those tiny flashes of light. The sun is still breathing out, as it has for 4.5 billion years. The magnetic field is still doing its quiet work. Everything is going on exactly as it always has. And you know, the sun is still out there right now. On the other side of the earth from you, shining on different oceans and different countries and different sleeping children, or children who are just waking up and rubbing their eyes and beginning their day. And even while everyone sleeps, the solar wind is still blowing. Those tiny, invisible particles are still crossing the 2 or 3 days of empty space between the sun and us. And somewhere near the top of the world, right now, in the long, dark Arctic night, some of them are slipping through the gap and drifting down into the air, and the molecules are getting excited, and the lights are glowing. Green mostly, probably. Maybe a little pink. The fox running with its glowing tail, the shields of the Valkyries catching the light, the spirit seals and beluga whales playing their game in the sky. All of those old stories trying to explain something so beautiful that people couldn't quite believe it was simply science. And the science, when you finally understand it, being just as beautiful as any story. The sun breathing. The earth catching that breath. The tiny invisible particles finding the gap. The molecules waking up for just a moment, just long enough to let out their little light. And down below, in the snow, a person looking up. You don't need to go anywhere to know that it is happening. You don't need to travel to Norway or Iceland or Alaska. You can lie here, just as you are, warm and still and heavy, and know that somewhere above the turning earth, the lights are there. They have always been there. They were there before anyone was here to see them. They will be there long after. The sun will keep breathing. The magnetic field will keep guiding. The molecules will keep flashing their tiny lights. All you have to do is know it. And maybe, somewhere in a dream, you might find yourself lying in clean, cold snow, looking up at a sky full of slow green light, your breath making small clouds, your body completely still. And the lights will drift and fold above you. And the stars will be there behind them, steady and patient. And the snow will be very quiet, and it will be the most peaceful thing you have ever seen. Good night.